folks, and welcome to another day in the Milky Way. And tonight we got a great show for you with my co-host, David Null, Hawkeye Two Feathers. Welcome to the show.
Welcome to everybody out there. We thank you very much. And as always, we welcome you with the love and the honor of the infinite creator. And we always pray and hope that each and every day that you will continue to learn how to accept and receive the knowledge, the healing, the wisdom, and always the blessings from the universe. Thank you, Robert, for having me. I fell asleep earlier, and so I'm late, and my hair's all a mess.
Oh, you got to get that rest.
Welcome, everybody.
Yes, everybody's in the house. Chloe's in the house. Howdy, all the way from Texas. Lucky Stone says, Tickle Tuesday to Terrific Tribe together. Yes. Elderberry says, hello, everyone. What's up, Robert? What's up, Elderberry? And here we go. Chloe, Hawkeye, Robert, there you go. Welcome to the show, everybody. It's going to be a good one. We're going to be talking about Thomas Fitzpatrick and how he was the first guy to take the wagon trains across the West. He found the passes. He started the rendezvous. He knew all the famous trappers and all the Indians. He fought with them, and we're going to talk about a lot about the Blackfeet Indians and a lot of things you probably didn't know about them. So how about that?
How about that?
Oh, yeah. Well, we got a great story for you tonight, too. That is right. So, getting right into it. You want to give everybody an update on your eye surgery?
Yeah, everything's went well so far. Everything is much brighter now. And I go back to the doctor tomorrow at 12:35 for an appointment to have him check to see if everything's copacetic. So far, so good. I can see you.
Great. Yeah, it's always better to be able to see. Seeing is very important. I mean, can't see, you're blind, right?
And the interesting thing about the cataract thing is that you don't know how bad it is until I had one eye done, and then I was like, left eye, right eye, holy mac. There goes Duggar.
Duggar.
Yep, but so I'm pleased the surgery went as easy and as well as it did. So tomorrow, fingers crossed, everything's great, and they'll probably release me for a 6-month, come back and see us and see how you're doing, kind of thing. But yeah.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So I'm almost set up here.
We'll see how well I do when I read this story.
That's all right. Hopefully you'll be fine. Exactly. If you can't read and see, you can't read the stories, and how terrible would that be if we didn't have our storyteller?
Hush your mouth.
That's huh?
But if I couldn't read, hush your mouth.
You would have to tell them by heart. I remember when. Oh, boy.
A little birdie told me.
Yes, a little birdie told you. Well, thank you, everyone. There's Scotty boy. Hello, gang. For your way. I love that. But anyway, he's here for the white women. That always makes me laugh. Anyway, getting on with things. We're going to share some pictures. Everybody loves pictures. I know Scotty can't read, so he's looking at the pictures. It's probably better than looking at my ugly mug. Anyway, tonight we're talking about Thomas Fitzpatrick, also known as Broken Hand. He was born in 1799, died in 1854 at age 55, but You know, he accomplished so much in his life that we need to remember him. And why is he worth remembering? Well, he was a co-founder of the Rocky Mountain Fur Company. Um, yeah, it's the same one that we talked about last week that employed a Jedediah Smith. Um, you remember how we were talking about? I'll just make an interjection here. You remember how we talked about how Jedediah Smith died? And, do we really know or not, right?
Oh, what? Yeah, where he went up to parlay with the Indians and they ambushed him.
Yes. Well, after my research and study, it was this guy, Thomas Fitzpatrick, who had spoke with the Comanche or went to and found out how he died because he was his good friend. Believe it or not, he was friends with a lot of guys, and we'll get to them in a minute. Okay, what? So so he's friends with Jedediah. What was it? Was some important things he did? He guided wagons west during the Oregon Trail. Actually, he led some of the first the first wagon train across of the Oregon Trail, and he helped map parts of the frontier. He served as an Indian agent, playing major roles in early negotiations with the tribes of the plains. He was nicknamed Broken Hand after a powder explosion mangled his fingers. Anyway, it was in 1836 that he led this wagon train to Oregon. And because he was trailblazing this wagon train, it proved that wagons could cross the Rocky Mountains. In the later parts of his life, he wrote up the Treaty of Laramie and helped negotiate the settlements, and that was in 1851. Remember, he died in 1855. So at this point, he was getting old and wise, and he was settling peace agreements between the U.S. and multiple tribes. This guy survived multiple Indian attacks, freezing winters, and even a grizzly or two. He was a walking survival manual. This guy could live through pretty much anything. Anyway, so where do we go from here? Well, Fitzpatrick, we'll show some of the stuff here. This is where he's got to cross. He's got to get over to Oregon, way over here. He's bringing people all the way from St. Louis, all the way up through the plains, which is fested with Indians at this point in time, and going all the way over to Oregon. And he did that back in the 1830s. What an accomplishment, especially making the first trail, which, is a feat in itself because, when you're breaking trail, that's harder than anything. He also became a senior partner in the Rocky Mountain Fur Company. This guy was smart. He also set up the rendezvous. We'll get to that in a second. He led the first wagon trains in the 40s, early 40s, 41 and 42. He also guided John C. Fremont in 1843 and military leaders like Carey towards the west. Now, remember, Fremont, he hooked up with Kit Carson, too. He was also appointed an Indian agent for the Upper Platte in Arkansas in 1846, gained a deep respect amongst the Plains Indians. He organized and helped negotiate the Laramie Treaty in 1851. He also continued doing this diplomacy until his death in 1854, while in Washington seeking a treaty approval. Now, what he died of, I don't know exactly yet. But he was married to Margaret Posiel, an Arapaho French interpreter. Together, they worked to promote peace. How about that? So, anyway, he was
really not everybody. Not everybody was as kind as he was, considering the Indian. He was trying to parlay peace and others were just killed.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start out with, you know, telling a story about how did he get the name Broken Hand? I'm going to refer to him, as Broken Hand. What happened? Okay, well, this is the guy we're talking about. Oh, this is some of the places. We'll get some of that, the maps and stuff in a little bit. But here you can see the trail and how he had to get to Oregon. You got to go right over the mountains, through the pass. Once you make it through the pass that he found, that made everything a lot easier. All the way, this is like, just to get from St. Louis out to here, that's 1,500 miles out to the rendezvous area, believe it or not. And that's not counting, and that's not even counting across the Rocky Mountains. You got a lot more to go there. But this is our guy. No, not that guy. This is the guy. This is one of the few pictures of him. I suppose this was in his later days when he was in Washington, But how did he get the name Broken Hand? Well, Thomas Fitzpatrick was already well on his way to becoming a frontier legend by the time he earned the name Broken Hand. He was born in Ireland. He wasn't even born in the United States. Around 1799, he had to cross the Atlantic in search of a life full of risk and reward. And after joining William Ashley's fur trading expedition in 1823, and a side note, this guy, Thomas Fitzpatrick, he was educated. Unlike a lot of the fur trappers out there that, literally didn't have any schooling or education or anything like that. He could read and write, do math, and that kind of gave him a heads up, because when you could read and write, you got promoted really fast. You got to be second in command, faster than a lot of the rest. They just knew you were smarter than most of the others.
And you couldn't be cheated as easy.
Well, yeah. I mean, the guys are bringing in their furs, and you got to count them. If you can't count, you don't know any numbers, you don't know how to categorize stuff, how to write it down and take a tally, what good are you? Here, this guy brought in a bunch, and this guy brought in a bunch, and I don't know how to write it down. All I know how to do is write an X for my name.
Yep, they used to call it ciphering.
Yeah. Oh, there's Steve Bowes in the house. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Anyway, good to see you. Good to see you. Anyway, where were we? Well, anyway, in 1823, he joined the Ashley Fur Trading Company. Now, he had never been a trapper or a fur trader or any of that stuff before. He was just a young man. He was about 22, 23 years old at this point. And, well, now he was part of Ashley's 100, because Ashley owned a fur trading company, and he hired 100 guys to go out and trap furs. And that's how he made his millions. Well, of course, you were in there, you were guaranteed a job. You signed a contract for a certain amount of time, and they didn't guarantee that you would survive or get rich, either way. But they did include employment for at least that amount at that time. And you would get paid by how much you would trap. Of course, he had to survive Indian wars, brutal winters, and harsh lessons of wilderness life. By the 1820s, he was one of the most respected trappers and scouts in the Rocky Mountains. Obviously, because he was smart. But his nickname wasn't earned in the battle. It came from something more sudden and painfully ironic. A gunpowder accident. Now, just to remind everybody, you got black powder guns, and sometimes, well, they don't work as good as they should. A lot of times, if something got stuck in the barrel after carrying it a while, it got jammed in the mud. Happens to bullets and guns nowadays too. It could blow up in your face. Gunpowder was gunpowder, and if it sparked, it could blow up. And remember, you were carrying a bag of gunpowder on your side that could catch fire and blow up too. Gunpowder is dangerous.
And back then, it wasn't highly refined.
That's true. That's true. So sometime in the 1830s, likely while preparing ammunition or handling a firearm in the camp, Fitzpatrick suffered a severe injury to his left hand. In that time, when men handled black powder daily and lived with no margin for error, even a small mishap could be a catastrophe. The blast reportedly shattered the bones in his hand and left him permanently mangled. Wow. Yeah. So I mean, it's like, hey, get a M40 firecracker and put it in your hand and then light it. See what happens. It'll blow your hand pretty much off. You know what I mean?
Yep, it hurts. I've had one. Somebody threw back in the days of the carnival. Someone threw an M80 onto the merry-go-round.
Oh, really?
And so it's like I saw it, grabbed it, and released it, and it got about that far from my hand when it blew up. And it hurt. It hurt.
Yeah,
it hurt.
Exactly. And if you would have had it in your fingers yet, it would have blew them off.
Oh yeah, yeah. I would, man. And that was back in the day when them M80s really packed a punch.
I watched a YouTube video with somebody doing that, and the guy goes, "Here, just hold on to this." And the guy holds on to it, and it blew up, and then he goes, "Oh my hand, it's gone!" You know, he's like, "Oh," I'm like, "My God, it blew his fingers right off." I'm like, well, you people are stupid. You're dealing with, an explosive. And, don't people know anything? I guess you got to learn the hard way for the stupid ones, right?
Yep.
Here, I got a fireworks. Hold this M80 in your hand until it goes off. See what happens. Okay. I don't got no hand. Jeez. Okay. Well, anyway, even with a mangled hand, unlike others who might have been sidelined by such an injury, Fitzpatrick refused to let it slow him down. He had the hand crudely treated in the field. Remember, back in the day, here, go get some string and thread and sew me back up. Here, tie it down with a, whatever, and put it on a stick. I'll be fine.
Yep.
These guys were tough. He was treated by his, the other fellow trappers, or with the help of some Native Americans. There were no surgery, no modern medicine, because if there was, well, he probably would have had his fingers all fixed and sewed in his hand, and the bones all, he would have been in a cast and surgery and God knows what else.
Or they would have simply chopped it off.
Yes. Well, I mean, nowadays they would say, "Oh, we'll fix you up. Oh, we'll make some money on this guy. He's got good insurance." Depending. No insurance, they chop it off. Good insurance, we'll fix it. Right? Anyway, used a grit or a stick and whiskey and a lot of luck for his pain medicine. The damage was permanent, and his fingers were twisted and largely unusable. But he adapted, and from that day on, he was known as Broken Hand. Rather than shrink from the, get away from the wilderness, he leaned harder into it. Fitzpatrick continued trapping, navigating, and later guided full expeditions across the Great Plains and Rocky Mountains. He trained himself to shoot, ride, and fight despite his injury, earning even the most respect from his fellow mountain men who understood just how much harder everything was with one good hand. His nickname became more than a physical description. It became his badge of resilience. Of course, over time, Broken Hand became a legend, not just for his rugged endurance, but also for his diplomatic finesse. Despite the injury, he was chosen as an Indian agent in the 1840s and negotiated peace treaties with tribes who respected his honesty and experience. His deformity didn't hinder his role. It added to his mystique, a visible sign of sacrifice for the land and life he had chosen. To Native American settlers alike, it symbolized a man who had paid the price for his knowledge. Fitzpatrick wore the name like armor. It reminded everyone who met him that he had stared in the pain in the face of pain and kept going. Well, of course, all those guys were tough back in the day. In a world where the weak didn't last and the proud often died early. Broken Hand stood for survival by wisdom, not brute force. He may have lost the use of his hand, but he gained something far more enduring, a place in the mythology of the American frontier, which I think is great. Anyway, so that's how he got to be Broken Hand, believe it or not.
Now, interesting, the mythology.
Well, yeah.
Wait a minute. What? Hang on. But he really existed.
Yes,
and
yes,
the things that he did were true stories.
They were, yeah. But remember, everything back then. Okay, go ahead.
They immediately use the word mythology like it's a myth. No, the mythology of this guy. No. See how they use words. They confuse you right from the beginning. Oh, the mythology of the guy. Wait, no. These were true stories, not a myth. Just want to point that out.
Yeah. Well, exactly. So let's see here. Well, what did he do in his life? Well, he took over. He started the rendezvous. And if we go back to this picture now here somewhere, we can see where the rendezvous were. Now, he started out as a trapper, right? He got trained as one of the 100, and they were out here. They were working in the mountains, trapping beaver, anything else out there, wolves, you name it. They were trapping it, getting the hides, because each hide brought so much money. And of course, they were working for the Rocky Mountain Fur Company, which later. And what made it better was he even helped. Okay, let's see. So trappers followed him because he got through blizzard attacks and starvation, and he was a genius at logistics. He helped create the rendezvous system, and that was one of those annual meetups, and people talk about it even to this day. I mean, sometimes there's a rendezvous in your own town somewhere where everybody dresses up and puts up tents and trades and shows you the old time supplies and things. And it's pretty cool. I would love to do that someday. But what was a rendezvous? Well, it's where trappers could trade their pelts and resupply and party like it's 1999 back in 1830. Believe it or not. So what did Fitzpatrick do? Well, he went to the rendezvous for a while. He started them up, the system, but he was still trapping, and he bought into the trapping company. He was one of three people, along with like Jim Bridger and Jedediah Smith. So those three guys got together and they bought out one of the companies and they started trapping the area. They came up with this rendezvous, and it lasted like, 20, 25, 30 years or something like that. And every year the men from the mountains would come down. They would meet at a certain place. And one day, this guy, Thomas Broken Hand, we'll go with Broken Hand, he decided, hey, you know where the money really is? The money is in the trading. The money is in the trading. And so what did he do? He hired a bunch of guys, hired a bunch of mule skinners and pack mules and people, and they trucked supplies out to the mountains, to the rendezvous, and traded with the trappers, the Indians, and anybody else who would come for their pelts, because that way the trappers didn't have to haul their pelts all the way back to St. Louis, which was very time consuming. So they got to the rendezvous, they got a lot of money, whatever, and then they could buy whatever they needed to survive, but there was a price to be paid for that. What was that price? Sometimes, 10 times, 100 times what the price would be in St. Louis for the same item. And of course, as you could you could buy a knife, a Skinner's knife in St. Louis would cost 50 cents. But if you brought it all the way out to the rendezvous, you could get $2 or more for that same knife. Big markup.
Think of it like this. The rendezvous were your first trade shows.
Yeah, exactly. And so, if you're looking at it like that, yeah, you're doing the trade, and then they get the pelts, and then they haul the pelts back to the city, where he probably cashed in on that too, and it was money to be made, and he was smart enough to figure that all out. So,
and considering, and why did they do it? Time.
Well, yeah,
time. Because they just didn't have time to do the trapping and then take it all the way to St. Louis. So they found a niche in business and said, if we had a couple of wagons, we could do this. Yeah, okay. And there you go.
Well, how much time did they save those trappers?
A bunch.
Yeah, well, it was a 1,500-mile trail. I will see it on the map here. It is, if you see this, it's a 1,500 miles from St. Louis out to the rendezvous. 1,500 miles. Takes 20, today it would take you 20 hours to drive from St. Louis out there in your car. It would take them 2 months or more to go from St. Louis out there by mule train. Ain't that crazy? Now, along the way here, there's no road. And what are you going through? You're going from St. Louis all the way through the plains, through Indian territory. Remember, this is the early 1800s. You're going through Indian territory all the way out to the rendezvous, where you could get battle Indians, you could get scalped, you get shot, you could get killed. And then when you get out to the rendezvous, you were kind of pretty safe there. But, along the way, any of these Indians could attack you. If you were a trapper and you had to haul your furs back, now you're not safe. You're probably not safe either, because you're traveling with a small group with all these furs, which all the natives knew they were worth a ton of money. So now you're like a sitting target. Even if you had 20, 30 guys with you, you're no match for 100, 200 Indians that are going to come and attack. And you never know when they're gonna. And what the Indians would do, of course, what was some of the most valuable things out west at that time? It was the horse and your gun. Without your horse, you were pretty much gonna die. And if you didn't have your gun, well, you were gonna die. So there you go. Scotty Boy says, it took me 25 hours to drive 1,700 miles. Yeah, 1,500 miles would take you 20 hours. If that 5 hours would go the other 200 miles, man. I know how that goes. So anyway, like I said, he took these supplies out west, and he made a good entrepreneuring thing. He became very rich over it. Anyway, let's see, well, my notes say. Um, he was in the company of a lot of legends. He had, you know, he had a lot of people that were out there at the time doing all of this stuff with him. Um, some of the most famous people were Jedediah Smith, Jim Bridger. Actually, Jedediah Smith was his co-explorer. Remember, he was his good friend. Um, anyway, they discovered the South Pass together. And of course, Smith was deeply religious and one of the first to cross to California from the east. Of course, then you had Jim Bridger, one of his other buddies. He was also a business partner, a fellow Rocky Mountain Fur Company leader. Anyway, known as Old Gabe of the West, Bridger founded Fort Bridger. Of course, you know, Jim Bridger founded Fort Bridger and was famed for his big, tall tales and his survival skills. He did a lot of great things. We'll talk about him another day. William Sublett. What did he do? He was a fur trader too. He was a fur trader associate and company owner. He partnered up with Fitzpatrick in the Rocky Mountain Fur Company. He played a major role in establishing the overland routes and fur trading infrastructure. Believe it or not, even back then, you have to have infrastructure. Milton Sublett. He was also a trapper and fur company investor. He was a partner in the company Fitzpatrick helped lead. He was a veteran of the fur trade and unknown to his toughness despite a leg injury that required amputation. Ooh. Yeah, he didn't just get his hand mangled. That guy got his foot whacked off. James Beckworth. He was another trapper and rendezvous associate. All these are famous guys. He crossed paths during major trapping seasons and annual rendezvous. Of course, James Beckworth was a black mountain man, who became a Crow war chief and famed storyteller. Bet you didn't know that one. Or I think we talked about that one before. Of course, we have Hugh Glass. Remember, they made the movie Revenant out of him. He was another one of Ashley's 100. We know him from some of Fitzpatrick's early expeditions. And, of course, we know him from the grizzly bear attack and how he came, 200 miles to safety. Of course, we know John C. Fremont. He was another explorer and military officer. Remember, I told you about Kit Carson. He served as a guide for some of Fremont's expeditions. He was known as the Pathfinder. Fremont's expeditions helped map the West, but it was Fitzpatrick doing the real pathfinding. Of course, then we have Andrew Henry and William Ashley. Now, we've talked about that a little bit. Founders of the fur trade expeditions, Ashley's 100. Fitzpatrick was one of Fitzpatrick's first employers, and the men who launched the trapping explosion of the 1820s. Wherever there's a niche, somebody will fill it. It was their roles were independent trapping and rendezvous systems shaped the entire area or era. Anyway, Fitzpatrick wasn't just a company accompanied by legends. He helped build the fur trade empires, and alongside them, if the mountain men were the Avengers of the 1800s, Fitzpatrick and Nick Fury would be cool-headed, and they would be on our TV screen today fighting the bad guys. But who were they fighting out there? Remember, they're in the mountains here. A lot of this is Idaho, Wyoming. You can see the Yellowstone River, the Snake River, South. What territory is this? Well, this was Blackfoot territory. And the Blackfoot Indians. And they were one of the most feared among and formidable Indian tribes on the northern plains. during the fur trade era. Now, the Blackfeet really had it out for the mountain men because they did not like the mountain men coming into their territory, and they felt that they were stealing their animals, their profit. I mean, they were right. The mountain men went in there, they trapped all the stuff, and didn't leave any for them. It was like, hey, you come in here and shot all the deer, and now we got none. They knew it, so they attacked pretty much all the mountain men. They really didn't like strangers. This is our area. We're keeping you out, and they had home field advantage. Put it that way. Now, what were the Blackfeet? The Blackfeet was a confederacy. Now, we talked about confederacies back on the East Coast, and what confederacy was that? That was the 5 or 6 nation that was over there on the East Coast, and that worked out pretty good. But here's the Blackfoot. And it was not just one tribe, so there were several groups, including the Blackfoot, then we have the Bloods, and then the Vegans, I guess it's Pegans. And so you have these 3 groups, kind of like little tribes, all getting together under one name. They were separate tribes, but they were all under the Confederacy of the Blackfoot. Their territory spanned from what is now Montana, Alberta, and Saskatchewan, way up in Canada here. So, they had a big area. They were Rocky Mountain Indians, basically. They were highly mobile, heavily armed, fierce, and territorial, and deeply protected of their hunting grounds. And rightly so. While white trappers weren't just visitors, they were bringing diseases and competition and war. Now, what happened with Fitzpatrick and the Blackfoot Indians? As a fur trapper and later a guide, Fitzpatrick absolutely encountered the Blackfeet, especially in the 1820s and 30s, where operating near the upper Missouri River and along the Continental Divide. These were very dangerous zones for trappers. The Blackfeet had a long, bloody rival with the Crow, the Flathead, and other tribes. Now, the Flathead, the flashback on that, the Flathead and the Crow Indians were fairly favorable with the mountain men. They did a lot of trading. The Flathead were very friendly, but like I said, all tribes are different, and you never know. But they were, of course, the Blackfeet especially resented white trappers, whom they saw as invaders. Fitzpatrick, Broken Ann, like many of Ashley's 100, had to move cautiously through Blackfeet country. Many trapping brigades avoided their lands altogether, while others were more daring and more desperate, risked it, often at deadly cost. And Fitzpatrick knew this, and when guiding expeditions later in his career, he was careful to negotiate, avoid conflict, or reroute through safer areas. Well, there was big clashes. In the late 1820s and the 1830s, several trapping parties from Fitzpatrick and his associates were attacked by Blackfeet war parties, and dozens of trappers were killed over the years, and rumors spread fast around the rendezvous camps about the dangers of Blackfeet territory. Of course, while there was no direct record of Fitzpatrick being attacked personally, he narrowly avoided it and may have witnessed or helped survivors of Blackfeet ambushes. Interestingly, despite the fearsome reputation, Fitzpatrick, even as a diplomat, seems to have respected the Blackfeet. He understood tribal dynamics, and as an Indian agent later in life, he worked to include them in treaty negotiations, like the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1851, even though the Blackfeet did not fully attend or agree on those early agreements, kind of like they did with all those treaties and negotiations. One chief showed up, get him to sign, it's the whole tribe. You know what I mean?
Yep, and then, of course, the native folk were the last ones to know. All the the army and all the settlers, they knew what was up. Oh, we just signed a treaty, and the Indians were going, treaty? What's a treaty?
Yeah.
They found out the treaty wasn't worth much.
Yeah, I know.
That's what the natives found out.
Oh yeah, exactly. The treaties were kind of shams. It was all, there was lots of small things in there that alluded more to the white man than it did the Indians. Well, anyway, how did Fitzpatrick, after he joined Ashley's 100, what happened there? What were they after? What was a 100? This is how he got his start. Ashley's 100 was a crew of young men led by William Ashley, and they set up traps in the Rocky Mountains for beaver pelts. This wasn't just an average job, especially not like today. It was high risk, high reward. If you didn't freeze, today, if you told a young man who was 20 years old, 20, 21, 22, that I got a job for you, but it's high risk, that you might freeze, you might starve or drown or get killed by rival tribes or other trappers, and you might come back rich, or you might not come back.
Yeah.
How many young men today would sign up for that? Quiet. I hear quiet on the. It's quiet. I think Steve Bowie, he's a teacher or something. How many of your students would be all in for going out into the wilderness and having to, freeze to death, drown, get attacked, all these things? How many of your students do you think would be up for that, being young kids? It's kind of a thing. Or you could get rich quick if you didn't die, drown, or freeze to death, or another trapper kill you off, because, they were all about themselves. As Ashley's trapping operations grew, and so did the dangers, because now, they trapped out some of the rivers and places. If you got hundreds of guys out there and Indians trapping and everybody's trapping, the animals are disappearing pretty fast. And they didn't, as far as I read, when they first started trapping, they tried not to over-trap things. But as competition grew, they just said, I don't care, I'm trapping every single one of them because I don't want the other guy to have any. I'm leaving 2 beaver, and he comes in, and then he traps those 2 beaver because, I trapped 50 of them. So might as well just trap the other 2. So they were leaving the rivers and everything pretty much. They were going to make the beaver extinct, literally. If that didn't go out of, if the beavers hadn't gone out of style, the beaver hats, beaver would be extinct today. Okay? So anyway, in 1826, Ashley started to pull back and sold off his interest. I think he knew that the fur trade industry wasn't going to last too terribly long. Plus, by this time, he was probably getting to be an older man because he started everything up. And if he did it for, 10, 15 years, I don't think you'd want to be out there in your 30s and 40s and 50s trying to trap in the cold streams and, battling the Indians. Give it up, sell it off, and retire. Right? So he pulled back, sold off his interest in the fur trade. And that's when Fitzpatrick began to rise. He teamed up with Jim Bridger, Milton Sublette, and others to form what would become known as the Rocky Mountain Fur Company. And of course, these weren't just trappers anymore. They were trader kings, controlling logistics, supplies, and routes, which is a dangerous business of hauling the furs from the frontier back to St. Louis. Like I said, they're hauling it all the way from out here, 1,500 miles, all the way back to St. Louis. That is just danger, 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 Will Robinson. Anyway, Fitzpatrick didn't seize power by force. He earned it through survival. loyalty, and skill, he was one of the few men who could negotiate peace with the native tribes, while also leading grueling expeditions across the hostile terrain. He knew how to run a trapping brigade and how to outmaneuver competitors like American Fur Company, owned by a cutthroat named John Jacob Astor, who became one of the richest men in the day. We'll have to look up him one of these days. John Jacob Astor, very famous man. His reputation as a dependable leader made him essential. His connections to both white traders and native communities made him invaluable. He was. He's bringing supplies to these trappers: bullets, gunpowder, thimbles, needles, cloth. Remember how we talked about how the Indians loved cloth? It was like, the thing. And if you didn't have a gun, or if you had a gun and no bullets or black powder, it didn't do you any good. What if you broke your traps that you were trapping the beaver with, and somebody took them or stole them or broke them, or you lost them in an Indian battle? Well, you got nothing. And now you need to trade, and he's bringing the supplies. One of Fitzpatrick's smartest moves was helping to establish and maintain an annual rendezvous system, a mobile marketplace where trappers, native tribes, and traders all gathered once a year to swap pelts and resupply and celebrate. Of course, they partied there too. They played games. They found wives. There was a little bit of everything going on there. They smoked the peace pipe with the natives, but for the most part, it was a peaceful system. Fitzpatrick ensured not just business, but unity among the independent trappers, who otherwise had no fixed base. He became a logistical mastermind and a political broker. And by the 1830s, the Rocky Mountain Fur Company was practically being run on Fitzpatrick's grit and brains. He was flashy. He wasn't flashy, I should say. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't violent like some. He simply outlasted and outsmarted everyone else. Remember, he was educated, and in doing so became one of the most respected figures in the fur trade, a quiet leader whose influence stretched from Missouri River to the edge of California. Yeah, this guy, he really got out there and, settled the West. He did a lot of things. One of the stories I was reading about, he was leading the mule pack, and they were headed to the rendezvous. And he was running late, right? And he ran into a group of the native, no, he didn't run. Wait a minute, let me back up here. They were running late, and he was afraid people would give up on the rendezvous because he didn't show. So he told the guys, you keep trucking along. I'm going to ride ahead, and I'm going to get there, and I'm going to tell everybody we're on our way, and they just have to wait a little while before one of the other companies come in and buy up all the furs and do all the trading. And when we get there, there's nothing left to trade or buy or do or anything. So he takes off, and he makes it through the wilderness. He's going along, and believe it or not, he gets lost. He loses his orientation of where he is. Now, remember, you're in the mountains. You could lose your way pretty easy. And he did. Kind of strange, but he did. Remember, there's no road with signs. You're just negotiating by the sun, the moon, stars, the mountains that you're seeing. He got lost. And along the way he got lost, he met up with a war party of Indians. And that was it wasn't the Bloods, it was the Pequots or whatever it was, the Petras. Anyway, he met up with them, and he was like, uh-oh. So he's on his horse, and he tried to outrun him. And now they're after him. There was about, 50 Indians, and against one. He didn't have a chance. If he was to fight him, he was going to get killed and scalped, and that would have been the end of him. So he got his horse ahead of him, and he jumped off his horse. He grabbed his gun, a pack, and let his horse go. They chased his horse down. They realized that he wasn't on his horse, classical Western movie style. In the meantime, while he was still free, he would walk back up the mountain. He found some brush. He hid in this brush, covered himself up really good, and stayed there. The Indians did come back and came looking for him. And as the tale goes, they came as close as 12 feet away from him and never seen him. He was, he was a whisper away from getting caught. And if he got caught, he would have been shot, scalped, tortured, who knows what else. But they managed to give up, and he had to stay hidden there for 3 days. 3 days. Can you imagine hiding in a brushy spot for 3 days, hoping that they don't see you? Now, you remember, they're not giving up. They just didn't find him there. So he takes off, and he starts walking. Now, at least he has his gun with him. But he comes to a river, and he makes a makeshift raft. And he has to get across the river. So he goes across the river, and just about to shore, the raft hits a rock, knocks the raft into pieces, and he falls in the water, losing his gun and pack. When he gets onto shore, all he has is his knife. And from there, he has to walk all the way to safety, which is where the rendezvous is. From, in the mountains, he could have been found by the Indians, and what are you going to do with a knife? You're going to fight off a tribe of warriors? Are you going to fight off a bear that may show up? You are pushing your luck. And how are you going to get food with just a knife? What are you going to run down a deer and stab it and eat it? You know what I mean? And the Indians are still looking for him. He thought he would be safe by crossing the river, but it didn't. He did make it, and he survived. Again, walking miles and miles and miles and miles on foot in dangerous Indian territory. Talk about a guy. Anyway, so I hope you all enjoyed that. I guess it ain't that long of a presentation, but long enough. Hawkeye, what do you think?
Folks back then, they had to survive or they were dead. They just, and, the legacy that these men left, because folks back in the day, man, we know who that Robert V guy is, number one, because there weren't that many people out there. Everybody knew everybody.
Right.
if you were a white person, you knew everybody, Yeah, old John, yeah, he's over on the, on the South Fork over there working the beaver traps, and they knew where they knew where certain groups were. And for folks that have never been out west, I know we keep talking about it, but the expansiveness of it. I was in a car and with a full tank of gas, and I was like, man, oh man. But to be walking with a knife, you say, well, he said, okay, you just don't understand what the wilderness was like back then. Out west is still, wild and woolly, but back then it really was. So these guys, their reputation was everything. Oh, that's what I wanted to bring up. Broken Hand, how did he become rich and famous? By treating his fellow trappers with respect. Because he never would have made it if he'd have cheated them.
That's right.
And he set up the rendezvous so that they could conduct legitimate business, to help, both the trapper and the company out. So, he was way ahead of his time as far as that's concerned, and his foresight, and that, if we could just get a couple of wagons, man, we could cut this, and if we could make 10 cents a pelt or something, that's going to add up. So, but anyway, but also, when they packed up all those pelts onto a couple of wagons, the mountain men already had their cash in hand. And so they like back to business. So, and they didn't have to spend time going to St. Louis and back.
Well, yeah, because a trip to St. Louis would have been 2 months through Indian territory. I mean, even if you would have, like I said, even if you would have had 50 guys with you and you were carrying all those pelts, it'd been like carrying gold, mules full of gold, bricks on their backs. And, mule can't run too fast. And here you are going through the prairie. Some Indian sees you from 10 miles away and says, look, there's a mule train coming. Let's get all our guys together. We're going to attack. We're going to have those pelts for ourselves. I mean, that's all it would take. And what are you going to do? You're going to protect your life before you protect that mule. And so you let the mules go, or you try to keep as many as you can, and the natives come by and either kill you or take your mule and then leave you sitting out in the prairie and all your hard work in the freezing cold. Because remember, you're not catching beaver in the summer. You're catching beaver in the fall or in the winter when their coats are the best, because that's when they're the thickest and prettiest. And, people want, Steve Bowe says, nothing in St. Louis anyway. Yeah, not anymore. But back in the day, that was the trading hub of the country. From St. Louis, everything went back to the States. That's where the crossing of the river was. That's where everybody headed up the Mississippi. That's where they took the Missouri up into the Rocky Mountains. That was the big hub.
But also, it was where trade went to New Orleans.
Yes. Down the river, you go up the river to get the goods. You go down the river, you get to St. Louis. That's where they shuffle it all. I suppose the river was better from there to New Orleans. Who knows? I'm not sure, but it's the waterways. Remember, the waterways were the highways or the interstates of the time. And so that was quite the thing. Scotty Boy says he could do with. I remember seeing here. He says he could do it by being alone. And I'm thinking, I can go for months without. Seriously, I can go months without contact. Well, a lot of these guys had to go months without contact, and it's hard. A lot of people can't. I know myself. I go, days without seeing or talking to anybody, and it doesn't bother me. When I first came out to North Dakota, it did, and I'm sure it would bother other people. When you're this far away, I have no neighbors. I have nothing out here. If I don't go to town or I don't talk to anybody, usually when I go to work, there's nobody around and nobody to talk to. So I'm alone there too. It's just me and the dogs here. That's pretty much it. And that could be days at a time. So I went from an activities guy before I came out here, I was an activities director, and a showman of sorts with lots of people around all the time. I gave horseback rides and things like that, and always had to be a people person. I come out here, and now I'm kind of turned into a kind of a recluse, believe it or not. Ain't that crazy?
You recluse, you.
Yeah, no, I'm serious. Now, when somebody comes by, I'm like, what was that? I see a car go by on the road, which only a few go by. I'm like, oh my gosh, who's that? Hope they don't stop here. How crazy is that?
Hope they ain't Mormons.
Yeah, it's like, oh man. But yeah, Witchy Moon's in the house. Yeah, Scotty Boy says it's a mindset for sure. It is. It really is. Some people can handle it, and some people can't. Some people can't go without the internet nowadays, and some people can't go without human contact. I had a friend come and visit me, and it was just too empty out here, too lonely out here that couldn't stand it. She was like,
too desolate.
Huh? Yes, too desolate. And she says, I went to the gas station, there was nobody there. I went to the restaurant, the only person in there was the cook and the waitress. Yep. She says, I went for a walk up and down the road and I couldn't even find the neighbor's house. I'm like, oh boy. That's how desolate it is. I walked up and down the road and I couldn't find the neighbor's house. Pretty bad. Oh, yeah. But anyhow, yeah, that was fun. But like I said, here we go. Anyway, we got Tales from the Passing of Glooskap. You're gonna read tonight, but I hope you all enjoyed that. Next week we'll be talking more about another mountain man. The big thing to take away from all this is that these mountain men went out there and they had a battle with the natives, the Blackfoot Indians. There was more than one tribe. It was a confederacy. They met up with these rendezvous, and not only did the trappers come, but the natives came too. And everybody was friendly to the most part. It wasn't like a big war broke out there and the Indians and the white man started fighting each other. It was one of those times where everybody just put their grudges on the back burner and became friends for a couple weeks and moved on. Now everybody thinks that this rendezvous, at least I did back in the day, I thought the rendezvous would be like for a fair, 2 or 3 day thing. No, it's more like 2 weeks or 3 week thing. Yeah, it was long. When you have a rendezvous, it was many days. Because the trappers all didn't come down on the same day. They dwindled in, little here, a few there, a few here, and a few there. Some stayed a long time. Some just got their supplies and left. But most wanted to, associate with their friends. That were what friends they had out there. And sometimes I bet you they didn't see anybody until the rendezvous. And, they would drink whiskey and smoke and get their clothes and mended and buy moccasins and, sugar, coffee. They would get flour, gunpowder, heck, who knows what all they had there. They probably had a lot of coffee pot. Imagine you got coffee, you got to have a coffee pot too, So.
Oh, yeah.
What do you say to all that? What do you think of this whole thing?
And tobacco.
Tobacco, yes, a good point. Very good. Tobacco. Shipped in from the Far East. Tobacco of the finest strains I can imagine now. Guy trying to sell this stuff. I have tobacco from back east with the finest strains, all harvested and cured to the best of our ability to raise tobacco. I'm asking a modest price. Blah blah blah. Anyway, well, we're all set. If you're ready, I'm ready.
Yeah, I wonder what a pack of smokes cost back then, huh?
Well, I don't even think they sold them as a pack of smokes. They probably had just raw tobacco and pipes. I mean, I've never heard of them having cigarettes. When did cigarettes get invented? I don't know. That's a good question.
Okay.
When was cigarettes invented? Or were they smoking cigarettes? I don't know that one. Huh. Roll, Scotty Boy. Roll your own. But did they have? They didn't have paper. Would they roll it in a leaf, or did they just smoke? Or did they only have cigars back then? Cigars and pipe tobacco. Or maybe they chewed tobacco. Maybe that they did
too.
chewing of the tobacco. That's a good question. Huh. I'll have to touch up for you. More details next week. Hope everybody hits the like button. Hit the like. Share it out to your friends. I see there ain't a whole lot of people here tonight, but hey, you have to watch all of them. Other people have to watch on the replay. But anyway, it's all yours here. The passing of Bluescap. You're doing cards, so everybody get you during the thing here. Get your picks in for the cards too.
Maybe cards.
Maybe cards. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Maybe. Uh-oh.
I might have to cut it short.
Oh, okay.
All right. So, the passing of Glooskap. And this is the continuing saga from the book Glooskap's Country and Other Indian Tales by Cyrus Macmillan, 1922. The story tonight is the passing of Glooskap. Glooskap, the magic master of the Indian tribes along the Atlantic coast of Canada, had a very great power for many ages. But as he grew old, his power gradually grew less. He had done in his long lifetime many great and noble deeds. He had freed his land of all the mighty monsters that had inhabited it before his coming. No evil beasts, nor serpents, nor dragons were now found near his home. And there were no longer cruel giants in the forest hard by. He had made his people happy. But strangely enough, his people showed him but scanty gratitude. When he grew old, they became evil, and they were not as faithful as in the days of his youth and strength. Even the animals grew treacherous. His dogs, once loyal, were no longer eager to do his bidding. And one stormy day, as he fished for porpoises, they stubbornly refused to obey his commands to head off the fish. Thereupon, in anger, he changed his dogs into a stone island, now a rocky lighthouse island on the Atlantic coast. All around him he saw signs of faithlessness, and often he was in great sorrow because of his people's ingratitude. One afternoon in the autumn, Glooskap walked alone by the ocean, thinking silently of his people's evil ways and of his own vanished strength. Behind him, the tall trees rose on the hills, their leaves now turned to a mass of many colors, yellow and red under the autumn sun. Here and there, clusters of red autumn berries peeped through the dying leaves. On the high bank, long stalks of goldenrod nodded their faded heads. The grass was withered brown, and from its depth came the doleful sound of crickets. Before him lay the sea, still and idle and gray in the soft mellow light. Subdued noises came from the tents nearby, where his people, busy and expectant, were making arrows for the great annual autumn hunt, for the hunter's moon had come. Otherwise, a strange silence, the silence of nature's death, filled the air. Glooskap knew, as he moodily walked along the beach, that summer had gone, that she had fled from the Northland, following the moose hide cord he had placed for her along the rainbow road to the wilderness of the flowers. Closing his eyes, he could see her again in all her beauty, as he had really seen her many years before, when he had first found her dancing among her children, the fairies of flowers and light. All the incidents of his long journey in search of her came back to him. The sail with old Blob the whale, the Southern Cross in the sky, the song of the clams under the golden sands, the lilac country with its magnolia and jessamine, the fair maiden dancers on the green, and summer herself with her brown hair and blossoms. Even his lost youth and his vanished strength seemed to come back to him. He could feel on his old cheeks again the soft air of the Southland. He could hear the music of its tiny streams, and he opened his nostrils wide in fancy to pleasant odors from scented flowers. And as he dreamed of the old days, he was lonely for Summer, his fairy queen. For, although he was a great warrior, he had a woman's tender heart. Somehow, on this autumn day, he was filled with a strange feeling of melancholy, such as he had never known before. He could not shake the feeling from him. It brought him a deep sense of coming danger, which he could not explain. Suddenly he was aroused from his dreaming by the appearance of his messengers, the loons, who were still loyal to him. They had been away many days in search of news, and now they came to him over the water, uttering strange cries that sounded like foolish laughter. Glooskap knew from their cries that they brought unwelcome tidings. When they met him on the beach, they said, "Oh, master, we bring you a sad message. From away across the ocean, a race of strange, pale-faced men is coming, smaller in size than our people, but more powerful. One of their number is more than a match for a score of your best warriors, for they carry with them deadly weapons, the like of which you have never seen. They are coming in wonderful ships, greater than your canoes. They will take all your lands and will kill those of your people who refuse to submit to their rule." The loons would have continued their story, but Glooskap wished to hear no more. He understood now the cause of his melancholy dread. He knew that the pale race of which the loons had spoken was the race of which he had long heard, and that the white men were coming at last. He knew, too, that it would be useless to stay to give them battle. His reign on earth, he knew well, was ended for a time, and now he must go away. Far out to sea, was another hunting ground to which he must sail to join his fathers. It was a place, he had been told, pleasanter by far than his old home on the shores of the great water, a place to which good warriors went when their work on earth was done. So he returned silently to his tent to get ready for his long journey. That night he called all his people to the gathering place. He told them that he was going away, far away, miles and miles over the sunlit sea. Not one of them should go with him. He would be away, he said, many long years, but someday he would come back. He told them nothing of the message of the loons, nothing of the white men's coming. But he offered as a parting gift to grant them each one last wish. And at once all the people wished for what they most desired, and all their requests were granted. For Glooskap's great power returned for a brief space before he went away. The people's wishes were very strange and varied. An old man who had been of little value as a hunter asked that he might be great in the killing of game, and Glooskap gave him a magic flute, which when played upon won the love of women, and brought the moose and caribou to his side to meet their death. And the old man, with not a care in his heart, went his way, for he knew now that he should always have food. A young Indian asked that he might have the love of many people. Glooskap gave him a bag very tightly tied. He told him not to open it until he reached his home, and then his wish would be granted. But the youth, being curious, opened the bag on the way. At once there flew from its numberless girls, all of whom strove for his attention, until in the struggle they trampled him to death. What became of the people, no man knows. Another, a gay and frivolous fellow, asked that he might always amuse people. Glooskap gave him a magic fruit from the forest, which would cause anyone who ate it to amuse all whom he met. He told him not to eat it until he reached his home, and then his presence would always be like sunshine to all. But he, being curious, ate the root on the way. For a time he amused all who met him, so that they all laughed and were of a merry heart. But soon, because he had not heeded Glooskap's command, the people grew tired of him and no longer laughed at him. And he grew weary of himself and found no pleasure in his power, which now no longer moved people to laughter. And his life became a burden, until in despair he killed himself in the forest. An old nighthawk, the evil spirit of the night, came down from the clouds and carried him away to the dwelling place of darkness. And he was never afterwards heard of among men. Another wished to become a fairy of the forest. Glooskap washed him in the sea and put a magic belt around his waist. And at once he became a fairy prince, dwelling among the elves. And they gave him a small pipe which made wondrous music. And to this day you can hear his pipe on sunny days in the meadows. But the wish that was most difficult to gratify, for it tried Glooskap's greatest power, was that of a youth who wanted to win a beautiful girl for his wife. She was the daughter of a powerful chief who placed such hard work and cruel tasks on all who desired her that they died in attempting them. Glooskap gave him his stone canoe and bade him sail away to the chief's home. He gave the fairies of the deep charge over him, and he tied the wings of the great eagle, the wind bird, so that there might be no wind during his voyage. He gave him also a magic belt and taught him a magic song, both of which should help him in his need. Soon the youth came without mishap to a large island, the home of the girl he loved. He hid the canoe in the trees and set out inland. At the end of a long road, he reached the village where the cruel chief and his daughter lived. He said to the chief, after the fashion of Indians when they want to marry, "I am tired of a lonely life. I have come for your daughter." The chief replied that the youth might have his daughter if he could do certain feats of strength. The youth knew that these were the feats, the attempt of which had cost many before him their lives. But trusting to Glooskap's help, he consented. The chief told him he must slay a great horned dragon that lived in the forest hard by, and that he must bring the dragon's head to his tent on the following morning. In the night, the youth went to the dragon's den. Over the mouth of it, he placed a great log, and then, standing near it, he sang the magic song that Glooskap had taught him. Soon the dragon came out in answer to the magic call. He waved his head all about looking for the sound. Then he placed his head over the log to listen. At once the youth severed the creature's head with the blow of his axe, and taking it by one of its great horns, he brought it in the morning to the chief's camp. And the chief, greatly surprised, said to himself, "I fear he will win my daughter." There were other difficult feats to try the young man's courage, but all of them he did without harm to himself and with great wonder to the old chief. Finally, the chief used one of his last and hardest tests. He said, "There is a man of my tribe who has never been beaten in running. You must race with him and beat him if you would win my daughter. You must both run around the world." The old man was sure that here at last the youth would fail. But the youth put on the magic belt that Glooskap had given him, and when all the people were gathered to watch the contest, he met his rival without fear. He said to the chief's runner, "What do men call you?" And he answered, I am Northern Light. And what do men call you? The youth answered, I am Chain Lightning. The starting signal was given by the chief, and the two rivals set out on their race. In a moment, they were out of sight and away behind the distant hills. The people all waited patiently for their return. Soon the youth, Chain Lightning, appeared. He had been around the world, but he was not breathing hard, and he was not even tired from his long run. There was yet no sign of his rival. Late in the evening, Northern Light came in. But he was very weary, and as he came near, he trembled and tottered. He confessed that he had not been all around the world. He had turned back, for Chain Lightning had gone too fast for him. Yet he was very tired. He admitted his defeat. The people wondered greatly at the power of the victorious youth, and the old chief said, I fear he has won my daughter. There was still a final test. The chief said, there is a man of my tribe who has never been overcome in diving and swimming underwater. You must strive with him and defeat him if you would win my daughter. And the youth agreed. Again, he put on the magic belt and met his rival without fear. When they met by the sea, the youth asked the chief swimmer, what do men call you? Then he replied, I am Black Duck. And what do men call you? And he answered, I am Loon. When the chief gave the signal, they dived and swam underwater. In a few minutes, Black Duck rose again, for he was out of breath. But the people waited in wonder many hours before Loon rose. And when he came up, he was not tired, but laughed heartily. And the old chief, well content, said to him, my tests are ended. You have won my daughter. That night, the great wedding feast was held, and the youth, taking with him his bride, set sail for his home in Glooskap's canoe. A few of those who asked gifts, Glooskap punished before he went away because of their foolish requests. One who came was very tall and proud of his good looks. He always covered his moccasins with bright beads and wore colored coats and sprinkled himself with strange perfumes, and on the top of his cap he wore a long feather. He asked Glooskap to make him taller and straighter than any of his fellows. And when Glooskap heard his wish to punish him for his pride, he changed him at once into a pine tree. He made him very tall and straight until his head rose above the forest. There he stands to this day, the high green feather in his cap, weaving always in the wind. And when the wind blows, you can still hear him singing with a moaning voice. I am a great man, I am a beautiful Indian, taller than my fellows. Many others Glooskap punished, but all who had diseases he healed and sent away happy. When Glooskap knew that the wishes of all the good people who had obeyed his commands had been granted, he was ready to set out on his journey. One day on the shore of the wide ocean, he made a great feast to which all his people came, and all the animals with them. But it was not a merry gathering, for they knew that they met with Glooskap for the last time before his long absence. In the late autumn afternoon, when the feast was ended, Glooskap prepared to lead them. He threw his kettle into the sea, for he would need it no more, and it became an island. And he tied one wing of the wind bird, so that after he had gone away, the gales would not blow so strong on the Atlantic coast as they had blown in his lifetime. And he talked long to his people and smoked his last pipe with them and gave them good advice. He spoke of his going away, but of the land to which he was going, he would say nothing. He promised that some day, after many years had passed, he would come again among them. Then in the evening, a great stone canoe came over the ocean, guided by two of the children of light. And Glooskap, seeing it, said, "It is now the sunset hour, and I must leave you." Many of his people, his good followers, who throughout his lifetime had been faithful to him, begged him to allow them to go with him. But he answered, "No, this last great journey I must make alone, for no man can come with me or help me." And just at the turn of the tide, as the sun set behind the distant hills, he embarked in the great stone canoe and sailed far out to sea with the ebbing tide, singing as he went a strange, sad song. His people and all the beasts looked after him until, in the deepening twilight, they could see him no more. But long after they had lost sight of him, his song came to them, weird and doleful, across the water. Gradually, the sounds grew fainter and fainter, until when night came, they died entirely away. Then a strange silence fell upon the earth. The beasts mourned until they lost the power of speech. They fled into the forest in different ways, and since that time have never met together in peaceful council as in the olden days. And they have never spoken like men. The great owl departed in sorrow and hid himself in the deep forest. Since that time he has seldom appeared by day, but at night he always cries, "Coo, coo, coo," which in the Indian language means, "I am sad, I am sad." And the loon, Glooskap's old messenger, wanders up and down upon the beach, calling for its master with loud, wild cries. And Glooskap's people grow smaller and smaller in number because of their master's absence, and they slowly waste away until someday they too shall vanish from the earth. So Glooskap sailed away over the sea to the distant hunting grounds of his fathers. There he lives still in a great long tent where he is making arrows, preparing for his last great battle. And when the thunder rolls and the lightning flashes, those of his people who still remain on earth know that he is angry. Where the sea sparkles most brightly in the sunlight or moans most dismally in the storm, they know that Glooskap is there. When the phosphorescent lights appear at night upon the sea, they know that he is working late by the strange light. And when there are no stars, they know that Glooskap lies asleep, taking his rest. But when his great tent is filled with arrows, Glooskap will come back to fight his last battle and overcome the evil creatures of the world. He will then bring back the golden age of happiness to earth, and his people, in hope and patience, still await his coming. The end. And so that's an interesting story.
Yes, that was an interesting story.
And I'm sorry, y'all. I got to cut short. I can't do cards tonight. And I apologize.
That's all right. And that happens sometimes.
Well, I'm really, really tired, and
yeah.
I had to take a nap, and I got an appointment tomorrow to see how my eyes are doing. But what I was going to say, at the end of this story, Glooskap comes back with the golden age. And think about what some of our folks are talking about now, that this is going to be the golden age.
Yep, that's true.
Just think about that. And that Glooskap's got, he's making arrows in his longhouse.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, yeah, it's a shame because, to this day, Creator, doesn't ask a lot. And to the native peoples who used to live by the land, seriously, and who used to live by the word of the Creator, Glooskap, he just, sits in the distance, moaning, one of these days. But the people have to see what they've done. In other words, oh, well, I didn't know, and I didn't. Well, yeah, we all kind of knew, but we didn't pay attention. And what I mean by that is, there are things that that we have done to the earth that's just unforgivable in a lot of ways. But so, we need to, pray for the earth and pray for each other. And because I continue to pray that each and every day, each and every one of you will continue to learn how to accept and receive the knowledge, the healing, the wisdom, and the many blessings from our Creator. And, you got to stick with it there and have faith.
That's right. That's right.
And
I
so,
agree.
Next week, my friends, I will hopefully be in better shape, and I will make up the difference with the doing card reading. So
Absolutely.
thank you, Scotty boy.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks to everybody out there. Remember, we'll be back next week for another great show. Remember, go out and do something nice for your neighbors and yourself. Remember, summer season's coming up. Don't put firecrackers in your hand because you'll blow up. Be careful. Be careful, because we want to see you back here. Remember, be the frequency you want to receive, everybody. Love you all. Peace, everybody.
Cheers.
Okay, I know you